Welcome to the Wellness Revolution Podcast, the radio show all about wellness in your mind, body, spirit, personal growth, sex, and relationships. Stay tuned for weekly interviews featuring guests that have achieved physical, mental, and spiritual health in their lives. If you'd like to have access to our entire back catalog, visit drveronica.com for instant access. And here is your host, Dr. Veronica.
This is Dr. Veronica. drveronica.com is where you can find me. You can get episodes on demand and here listen to all matters of health and wellness and interesting topics that you're not going to hear just everywhere else. So as you know, and you're going to hear more of this, I also have with me my co-host, Russell. Hi, Russell. Are you doing okay?
Hello, Veronica. I am so good you can't even imagine.
Yes, and it's interesting because Russell and I always chit-chat about our parents. Russell's father is in his mid-90s and unfortunately had a slip and fall a few weeks back and has been put into nursing care and appears to be slipping. And we all go through these phases in life, and this is what we call stress.
Yeah, we could call it that.
Yes. And then on the other side, my father had been in the hospital. I'm not quite sure where he is right now. And people say, why don't you know where your father is? Because my father was in the hospital for about 5 weeks. He was being not so coherent as they felt when he went to his eye doctor appointment. And so they sent him off to the hospital. As they went to the hospital and they realized what was going on, his medications, he wasn't getting quite right. And I said to the hospital, look, I'm concerned he's not functioning really well and he's not taking things the way he's supposed to and he's living by himself. And they decided to do a formal evaluation. And my father is an extremely bright man, a brilliant man. And interesting to talk to because he has an interesting history. Now, everybody says their parents are brilliant and we all think our kids are brilliant. But a little bit about my father is, by training, he's an electrical engineer. And at one point, he was the chairperson of IEEE, the Computer Society. And so obviously to be the head of a bunch of nerdy engineers internationally means that you're pretty up there if all your colleagues respect you that way. Anybody who has ever been part of a national organization. So one of the issues with him is because he's so high functioning and really, really high functioning that when he talks to you, you don't really pick up that there's anything going on. Of course, he's my father. I pick up that there's something not as good as it used to be. And I was concerned about him living alone and not taking his medicine quite the way he should. And I've seen this a lot. When I was in my traditional medical practice, kids used to come into me, middle-aged kids would come into me and say, you got to tell my father or my mother to stop driving. You got to get them to move out and be with somebody else. And of course, none of them wanted to do it. None of them want to cooperate. And so what do you think happened? I have two parents. My mother we all have two parents. I know that's silly. I have two parents, but my parents are divorced for a long time. My mother lives on her own. She's 80 years old, absolutely fine, travels around the world and does all these wonderful things. My father lives on his own also in a different place. And my mother cooperates with the program. My father decides that he would like to do it his way. Our concern about him doing it his way at this point is not just me, but all the people that were in the hospital evaluate him thought that his functioning was off enough that they didn't want to let him leave the hospital, but they didn't know what to do with him because he wasn't nursing home care or anything like that. So he was in between. And there was all this discussion about legal guardianship and all this other type of stuff. Well, I believe that what happened is my father found a relative who was willing to say, I'm going to watch over you. Although the best way is to have somebody who has nursing care come in and make sure he's okay because he does take insulin 3 or 4 times a day and a bunch of other medicine. But no, that's of course not what Dad wanted. He wanted to do it his way. And so here we are with stress, waiting for the next event to happen from when I get a call from a hospital or something else, because that's the way it's going to be. And then it's going to be forced. So I just share with you some of the stories that we're going through. Russell's father is in his mid-90s now and has been very, very fiercely independent. And this puts stress on the whole entire family. And I what do I say about this? When I get to that point in life, I'm going to be the parent that's not going to be like that on my kids, but every child has one parent that's going to be the difficult one. And Russell, you don't have any kids, so you don't have anybody to torture.
I know. Well, I have you, Veronica.
You're going to torture me? Probably.
Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, why do I talk about that now is because my father is a long-standing diabetic. And one of the things I always remember is my father was a wonderful father growing up, but the way he ate is just always been less than health promoting, let's say, to put it very nicely. He would have a little bit of coffee with his sugar, and he'll have his, cookies, cake, and ice cream with sweet and low in the tea. I'm sure you know somebody who eats like this. But why do we talk about this? Because I really believe that the world is here for me to observe what's going on and then present to you why there's an issue. And so my father, who is experiencing memory loss, who has had long-standing diabetes and high blood pressure and all these other things, I believe is a direct result of his lifestyle choices. And I also believe that his brain is inflamed now, which we now know that memory loss and things like Alzheimer's and everything like that aren't because you got tangly plaques in your head. We've actually seen people with tangly plaques with perfectly good memories, but now because of inflammation. And the number one cause of inflammation is what you're putting in your mouth. And so a lot on Wellness for the Real World, we're going to talk to people that have different ways and different strategies to help people figure out how to be more healthy. There is not a one size fits all. You absolutely have to figure out what works for you and feel good about it. I think most people who have trouble with anything that has to do with food, they have the attitude, well, I don't like that. Well, there's so many different ways to do it now. There's going to be something that's health promoting for you that you're going to like. You just have to open your mind and try it. So this is a way to introduce our guest today, Carrie Brown. And I got to tell you, you're going to love this lady because you know what she used to do. And she probably does it still wonderfully now, but in a way that we would all love to eat it because it'll be great for our body is Carrie is a ex-professional pastry chef, but now she is a cookbook author and has written several cookbooks and even had a chocolate TV show. She has a chocolate cookbook and has made pastries for the Queen of England. Now, how many people have done something like that? I mean, even here, we're here in America, we're all obsessed still with the Queen of England because we need to know what really she's eating. She's probably not eating the pastries. She's eating something good because how old is she? But Carrie also helped write a book with a gentleman, Jonathan Baylor, called The Calorie Myth. And I always talk about calorie myths. I say, you know what? The reason why people aren't losing weight is because they're counting calories and they're exercising too much. And guess what? That obviously doesn't work. If it worked, everybody would be the perfect size because they could just play around with the math of the equation. That's not what does it. So I'm going to bring Carrie on. Carrie, welcome to Wellness for the Real World.
Hi, Veronica.
How are you today?
I'm doing good, but I got to tell you, it's I'm on the Pacific coast and you're on the East Coast, so maybe the coffee hasn't quite kicked in yet.
You're saying it's really, really early for you.
It's really, really early for me.
Yes. Well, I'm happy for you to be on the show, but let's talk a little bit about how you went from a pastry chef to this guru who talks about healthy eating. How did that transition happen?
Really, I guess it started to happen when I was, let's say about 27, when I woke up one day and looked in the mirror and went, whose body is that? Up until that point, I had been, 100 pounds soaking wet. I'm 5'4", so, in England that will be a size 8. Here it's probably less than a size 0. And I up to that point, being a pastry chef, I'd always been, this super skinny, vibrant, but of course I'd been in the bakery stuffing myself with sugar and wheat and all those lovely pastry things, but I still had this kind of gorgeous body. And then I got to my late 20s, and suddenly, even though I was doing nothing different, my body was starting to look decidedly different, and I didn't like the way it looked. And so I kind of started the whole, what's going on, and I tried various things, and it seemed to be that I no longer had control over my weight. I wasn't doing anything different, but suddenly my body was behaving in a very different way, and I started to gain weight. Over the next, 8 or so years, it didn't bother me so much. But after I moved from Europe over to America, things really started to ramp up. And it got to the point where I was really, really unhappy with the weight I had become. And I decided that it was time that I was going to have to start doing something about it. And so I did what everybody does, which is eat less and exercise more, because that's what we've been told for the last, 40 years. And to, don't eat fat because fat makes you fat, and, all these other things. So I started doing what traditional medicine has given us, and it made no difference. And so eventually, after doing a ton more exercising and eating basically nothing, I went to my doctor and I said, there's something wrong. There has to be something wrong, because I'm doing the eating less and exercising more, and I'm doing it religiously, and I'm not cheating, and nothing's happening. And my doctor at the time said to me, go eat slim fast for 10 days and keep doing the same amount of exercise you're doing. Eat slim fast, which will give you about 450 calories a day. Do that for 10 days, you'll lose 10 pounds, and you'll feel like you're back in control, because it is just thermodynamics, calories in versus calories out. And I'm like, okay, I feel like I've done that, but okay, you're a doctor, you know what you're talking about. So I went away, and I did my 450 calories a day of slim fast, and I cycled what felt like round the entire globe. And 10 days later, nothing had changed. I was exactly the same weight. So I went back to him and I'm like, dude, there's something wrong here, because this calories in, calories out isn't working. What you told me to do didn't change anything. It's obviously giving me a calorie deficit is not changing the problem. And he looked at me and he said, but it's thermodynamics. It calories in, calories out. And I said, but I've just proved it can't be. And he said, but it's thermodynamics. It's calories in, calories out. And so I fired him. And
Good for you. Good for you.
And shortly after that, I started, I actually had a hysterectomy. And back then, you stayed in bed for a while. So I was at home and I was on bed rest for a couple of weeks. And I amused myself by watching movies on Netflix, and I started watching things like Fed Up, and there's some really cool nutritional movies out there, and I started watching those, and I learned a ton, and as a result of that, I ran into a gentleman named Gary Taub, who wrote Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It, and that really started to change everything for me. Just cutting out the carbs and focusing on nutrient-dense proteins and fat. And literally after 3 days of doing that, my muffin top disappeared. And wow. I'm like, right? And so I was like, okay, if this hadn't happened to me, I would never have believed it from someone else, but I went with it. And shortly after that, I met Jonathan Baylor, who was in the process of publishing his first book, The Smarter Science of Slim, and I started working with him. And having read The Smarter Science of Slim, that was kind of the big aha for me, was it's, get rid of all the carbohydrates, the grains and the sugars, and the industrial seed oils, start eating nutrient-dense food, focus on, high-density, nutritionally dense proteins, healthy fats, and non-starchy veggies. And that, for me, is when everything changed. And I started to see results dramatically. And so at that point, I went, okay, I can't carry on, being a pastry chef and blogging about how I go out every weekend and eat waffles and French toast and all of this stuff. And then on the other hand, be helping to share the message that the calorie myth was bringing to the world, because there was this huge integrity disconnect. And so I just had to stop doing the traditional pastry chefing piece, and I started focusing on developing recipes that would fit with the premise of the calorie myth. And so that's kind of what made the change for me. So I now use what I learned as a pastry chef to create recipes that are incredibly delicious, but also incredibly healthful, and will also help people to get to their goals in terms of wellness and weight loss, or fat loss, which fat loss is what we really want, not weight loss.
Wonderful, wonderful. Why do you think it's taken so long for people to realize that the answer is not calorie counting? Why is it taking so long?
This probably isn't politically correct, but I think if I'm going to be politically incorrect, yours is the show to do it. And my one-word answer would be money.
I think that it's politically good for people to be sick because it's a great political talking point, because people stay in fear and they're going to vote based on whether we're going to keep Affordable Care Act or whether we're not going to keep Affordable Care Act. And oh my God, you're going to take my medicine from me. Bah! I agree. Money.
But I think if diabetes is incredibly lucrative.
Yes.
There's a huge number of people who will no longer be able to fund their lifestyles if we make diabetes go away.
Yes, and I agree. There's money in sick people and there's money in poor people. Keeping people sick and poor, I think, has become just the way it is today in America, especially keeping people sick. That's all we see on TV are commercials for different pharmaceuticals. We rarely see commercials for how do you really live a healthy lifestyle without taking all the drugs that are going to poison you, really.
Well, if we just took diabetes and statins, diabetes medications and statins out of the equation, it would wipe billions of dollars off of payroll of a lot of people.
This is true. Now, Russell, I know you're chomping at the bit over there. What do you want to ask Carrie about?
Well, there are a couple things I'd like to ask. Like, you mentioned nutrient-dense proteins. What is a nutrient-dense protein? Well, what's an example?
So,
is that a meat or?
Yeah, I'm talking about meat. And of course, then again, and the caveat is I am well aware that not everybody can afford the grass-fed and the organic and all of that. So you have to start where you are with what you have and do the best you can with what you have. If you can do the grass-fed, organic, pasture-raised, no hormones, that is your absolute best bet in terms of choosing meat. But outside of that, you do the best you can. And if you can't get grass-fed, then you buy the best quality you can from your local supermarket. But yes, so meat, eggs. Eggs are an incredibly nutrient-dense source of protein. Eggs
Here. Absolutely. The perfect food is an egg.
They are perfect food. Yeah. However, I've got to say that we probably need to knock the egg white thing on the head, because we need the fabulous fats that come in the egg yolk. So you got to get your healthy fats in. You can't just live on protein. I mean, if you want to lose weight fast, just eat protein and non-starchy veggies. But your health won't be as great if you do it that way. So it would be better to go slower but more nutrient dense by keeping the healthy fats in your diet. And as we now know, I say we, as more and more medical professionals are coming to realize fat does not make you fat, eating fat doesn't make you fat, and we actually need a level of healthy fats in our diets to be optimally healthy.
So let me just put a little caveat on that. Russell, let me put a little caveat on that. One thing that I know from studying functional medicine is everybody's bodies metabolize completely different ways. So there are a small group of people who they don't metabolize fat correctly. And so they may say, okay, I'm eating the healthy fat, I'm doing that, and I'm still not being successful. So if you've come under that type of situation where you realize that I'm eating the healthy fats, I'm doing everything that they say, you are one of those type of persons. You need to be with a functional medicine specialist who can uncover whether or not you are one of the people that genetically is more suited to something else that's a little bit different. One size doesn't fit all. So for most of the population, that let's eat the healthy fat, let's cut out the fats that are not health promoting is what's going to work. But then for another small segment of the population, that's not going to do it. And so if that is you, this is why you have to have professionals on your team that know exactly what they're doing with this and are doing more than calorie counting. But wait, I just want to ask Carrie, you say there's something that you have to do before you even lose weight, and I'm dying to hear what you say that is.
Well, we haven't talked before, but what you just said was the perfect segue. I could not agree with you more about the whole, there's no one size fits all. And so what you need to do, and this again is personal experience. I've spent the last year, I became really ill a year ago, which was just baffling to me, because for the last 3 years prior to that, I've eaten this fantastic, healthy, nutritionally dense diet. I mean, as far from the standard American diet as you can imagine. Huge amounts of non-starchy veggies, healthy fats, nutrient-dense proteins. I mean, I've been doing everything right. Zero sugar, no soda. I mean, just what most people would consider this ridiculously healthy diet. And a year ago, I became really, really ill. And it was like, how is this even possible? And so I've spent the last, up until last July, I was just getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And then in July, I'm like, okay, traditional medicine is not helping me. I went to my regular doctor. He took blood tests. He said, your blood tests are all normal. You're fine. And I was barely able to function. And I'm like, okay, clearly I'm not fine. I can't go to work. I can't get up in the morning. I've been hospitalized twice for migraines in the past month. I've got psoriasis, which has never gone away. I've got all of these things, but I'm actually to the point now where I can barely function. Something's wrong. He said, your blood's fine. You're fine. So again, I fired him as well. And I started down my own road of, I am going to find out what's ailing me if it's the last thing I do. And through that process of finding out, I have absolutely come to agree with you, Veronica, that everybody needs to find out what is their thing. And a one-size-fits-all diet doesn't work. Now, so what you need to do before you even think about trying to lose weight is find out via a naturopath or a doctor who gets it or someone who's involved in functional medicine. You need to find out what is your blocker, and you need to get that cleared before you start to lose weight, because in my experience, it doesn't matter what you do, you will not lose that weight if there's an underlying health issue, like your thyroid's not firing on all cylinders, your adrenal glands aren't working properly, your liver's overloaded, you've got some genetic wrinkle like I do. Once you fix that, everything else becomes easy. So I love how you introduced that, even though you didn't know what I was going to say. It was just so perfect.
Yes.
Because
so you know
my
that
experience
it's wonderful, because Carrie, I love absolutely what you're doing. We're like coming down on a break where we got a break, and I'm going to have to say goodbye. But I just want to promote you more because you have a great blog. Carrie's one of those people. I was just kind of surfing the internet. I'm always looking for interesting guests, and I found her. Carrie Brown, Carrie Brown, BROWN.com, CarrieBrown.com. She has some fascinating information on her website. She travels. It's just, it's regular every day that you can just read it and enjoy it and laugh and watch her adventures. And she also has some great cookbooks and great tips so that you can learn how to live every day. Now, I'm going to thank Carrie because Carrie just gave a great commercial for what I do. I mean, I am, and Carrie says, well, how did you know? How did you introduce me? Well, I'm an intuitive. I'm a medical intuitive, but I'm an intuitive. And so I get what's going on with energy. So no, I had no idea how Carrie was going to answer that question, but I really did. So let me just tell you that for people who are listening and they want to find out, how do I figure out how to do all this? Go to drveronica.com. If you're in my geographical location, I do talks all the time on these type of things. Go to my website, drveronica.com, look under events. But if you say, I'm far from you, Dr. Veronica, what do I do? I do webinars all the time. You can tune in on the internet and see the webinars, but I also offer free breakthrough sessions for people to figure out what's going on, because I can figure out what's going on a lot with people just from sitting and talking to him. So I want to thank Carrie Brown. I want to thank my co-host, Russell. We're listening to Wellness for the Real World. I'm Dr. Veronica.
Thank you for listening to the Wellness Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more on how to bring wellness into your life, visit drveronica.com. See you all next week. Take care.